I pulled into my driveway after 2 grueling weeks in Seattle, my muscles aching from endless client meetings and airport delays. The garage door rolled up and my heart dropped to my stomach. Empty. Completely empty. My 1977 Porsche 911 Turbo was gone. I stood there in disbelief as my mother, Linda, appeared at the kitchen door wearing a satisfied smirk that made my blood run cold. "Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life in Paris," she announced with obvious pride. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "What's so funny?" She snapped, her confident expression starting to crumble. The chuckle escaped me again as I watched my mother's face change from smugness to uncertainty. She crossed her arms defensively, waiting for my explanation, while my father, Robert, emerged from the house, equally pleased with himself. "You want to know what's funny, Mom?" I said, setting my travel bag down on the concrete. "That car wasn't mine." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the gears grinding in their heads as they processed my words. "What do you mean it wasn't yours?" My father demanded, his voice already losing its earlier confidence. "It was sitting in your garage for months." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a text message chain, turning the screen toward them. "That Porsche belongs to Marcus Wellington. He's the CEO of Wellington Industries, my biggest client. He was having his home garage renovated and needed somewhere secure to store it temporarily." My mother's face went pale. "But we sold it to that nice young man at the car lot for $15,000. Jessica needed money for her European vacation, and you were gone, and we thought you'd help yourselves to someone else's property." I finished watching them both deflate like punctured balloons. That nice young man bought a pristine collector's car worth $300,000 for pocket change. The color drained completely from my father's face. He gripped the doorframe for support. $300,000. That's impossible. It was just an old sports car. I walked past them into the house, heading straight for my desk, where I'd left detailed notes about the vehicle. The papers were exactly where I'd placed them 2 weeks ago, untouched and unread. I held them up for my parents to see. "Right here," I said, reading from my own handwriting. "Marcus Wellington's 1977 Porsche 911 Turbo, collector condition, estimated value $250,000 to $350,000. Under no circumstances to be moved or touched. Critical client relationship." I looked up at their horrified expressions. "Did either of you bother reading this before you decided to commit grand theft?" My mother sank into her favorite armchair, her hands trembling. "We didn't see those papers. We just saw an old car taking up space in your garage. Jessica called from London crying about how all her friends were traveling through Europe while she was stuck working at that awful retail job. So you stole a car to fund her vacation," I said flatly. "A car that belongs to the man who's responsible for 60% of my annual income." My father tried to salvage the situation with his usual bluster. "Now hold on, son. We didn't steal anything. We made a decision about property in our family's possession. You should have been clearer about the situation." "Clearer?" I laughed bitterly. "I left written instructions. I told you both verbally before I left for Seattle. I even gave you Marcus's contact information in case of emergencies. What exactly was unclear about don't touch this extremely valuable car that doesn't belong to me?" The phone rang, cutting through the tension. My mother answered with a shaky voice, and immediately her expression brightened artificially. "Hi, sweetheart, how's Paris?" I could hear Jessica's excited chatter from across the room. She was gushing about her suite at the George V Hotel, her shopping spree on the Champs-Élysées, the Michelin-starred restaurant where she'd had lunch. My parents exchanged guilty glances as their daughter detailed how she'd spent their stolen money. "Jessica, honey," my mother interrupted weakly, "we need to talk about the money we gave you. What about it? I'm having the most amazing time. You should see the photos I posted on Instagram. All my friends are so jealous." I'm finally living the life I deserve instead of being stuck in that dead-end job. My father took the phone. Jessica, we made a mistake. We sold something that wasn't ours to sell. You need to come home immediately. Are you insane? I just got here? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Whatever problem you're having, figure it out without ruining my vacation. I've already paid for everything non-refundable. She hung up, leaving my parents staring at the silent phone. The weight of their actions was finally sinking in. They'd enabled their daughter's selfish behavior by committing a serious crime, and now she was thousands of miles away spending the evidence. When does Marcus get back? My mother asked quietly. I checked my calendar. 3 days. He's wrapping up business in Frankfurt and expects to pick up his car the moment he lands. 3 days, my father repeated numbly. We have 3 days to fix this. No, I corrected. You have 3 days to fix this. I had nothing to do with your decision to sell stolen property. In fact, I specifically told you not to touch that car under any circumstances. My mother started crying. We were just trying to help Jessica achieve her dreams. She's been so depressed working at that store, watching her friends graduate and travel while she's stuck here. We wanted to give her the same opportunities. By stealing from my client, I said. By risking my reputation and career. By potentially destroying the most important business relationship I've ever built. Did you consider any of that before you decided to play Robin Hood with someone else's property? The truth was settling over them like a heavy blanket. They'd acted impulsively, driven by their chronic favoritism toward my sister without considering the consequences. Their golden child was living it up in Europe, while their responsible son faced potential ruin. We'll get it back, my father declared with false confidence. We'll go to that car dealer first thing tomorrow morning and explain the situation. He'll understand. We'll pay him back and get Marcus's car returned before he even knows it was gone. I shook my head. You really don't understand how serious this is. Do you? You didn't just sell a car. You sold someone's irreplaceable collector's item for a fraction of its value to a stranger who had no idea of its true worth. What do you think happens to underpriced exotic cars at used car lots? The question hung in the air as reality began to dawn on them. Used car dealers weren't collectors. They were business people. They bought low and sold high. The chances of that Porsche still sitting on the lot were virtually zero. We'll figure this out. My mother said more to herself than to me. We have to. But looking at their frightened faces, I could tell they were finally beginning to understand that some mistakes can't be undone with good intentions and desperate measures. They'd gambled with my future to fund Jessica's fantasy, and the bill was about to come due. The next morning, we drove in tense silence to Rodriguez Used Cars, on the outskirts of town. The lot was filled with the usual collection of beat-up sedans, rusted pickup trucks, and faded SUVs with inflated price tags. None of them remotely resembled a pristine Porsche 911. Tommy Rodriguez greeted us with a knowing smile that immediately put me on edge. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with slicked back hair and gold chains that screamed small-time hustler. His confident demeanor suggested he'd been expecting us. Let me guess, he said before my father could speak. You're here about the Porsche. We need to buy it back, my mother blurted out. There was a misunderstanding. The car wasn't actually ours to sell. Tommy's smile widened. Yeah, I figured that out pretty quick when an old couple showed up trying to unload a $250,000 collector car for $15,000. I mean, what was I supposed to think? My father's face flushed red. You knew it was stolen? I knew something was fishy. Tommy shrugged. But hey, you had the title signed and everything. Looked legal to me. I run a business here, not a charity for confused families. Where is the car now? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Gone. Sold it that same afternoon to a collector in Nevada. Guy named Bradley Sinclair paid me $60,000 cash, no questions asked. He specializes in acquiring rare vehicles for private clients who value discretion. The words hit my parents like physical blows. My mother actually staggered backward, gripping my arm for support. 60,000, my father whispered. You made $45,000 profit on our mistake. Your mistake, my opportunity, Tommy corrected cheerfully. That's business, old man. Besides, I took a risk buying a car that was obviously hot. Could have ended up with nothing if the cops came looking. We'll pay you 60,000, my mother said desperately. We'll pay you more. Just help us get it back. Tommy laughed a harsh sound that echoed across the empty lot. Lady Bradley Sinclair doesn't give cars back. He runs a high-end operation for collectors who want vehicles that can't be traced. Once a car goes into his network, it disappears. He's got warehouses, shell companies, overseas connections. That Porsche could be anywhere from Vegas to Switzerland by now. I pulled out my phone and found Bradley Sinclair's business number online. He answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and professional. Sinclair Acquisitions. Mr. Sinclair, this is Artemus Crawford. I believe you recently purchased a 1977 Porsche 911 Turbo from Tommy Rodriguez. There was a long pause. And you're calling because the car was sold without proper authorization. The actual owner is Marcus Wellington, and we're prepared to pay fair market value to get it back. Bradley chuckled. Mr. Crawford, I paid fair market value to Mr. Rodriguez. If there were ownership issues, you should have resolved them before the sale. I'm not in the business of unwinding completed transactions. The car is worth $300,000. You paid $60,000. I paid what the seller was asking. If Mr. Rodriguez undervalued his merchandise, that's not my concern. I suggest you take up your ownership dispute with him. Please, my mother grabbed the phone. My family made a terrible mistake. We'll pay you anything you want. Bradley's tone turned cold. Ma'am, I don't negotiate with desperate people who can't keep track of their own property. The car has already been placed with a client. This conversation is over. The line went dead. Tommy watched our exchange with obvious amusement. Told you, he said. Bradley doesn't play games. He's got connections you don't want to mess with. Probably already moved that car through 3 different shell companies and changed the VIN numbers. It's gone, folks. My father's hands were shaking with rage. You knew this would happen. You knew we'd never get it back. I knew Bradley would take good care of it, Tommy replied. Which is more than I could say for a family that doesn't know the difference between their own property and someone else's. We could report this to the police, my mother suggested weakly. Tommy's expression hardened. Report what that you sold stolen property and I bought it in good faith. That I followed proper procedures while you committed felony theft, be my guest lady. I've got security cameras, signed paperwork, and a spotless reputation. You've got a story about family misunderstandings that no cop is going to buy. The drive home was a funeral march. My parents sat in stunned silence, finally grasping the magnitude of their error. They destroyed a $300,000 car to fund their daughter's vacation, and now they face the impossible task of explaining this to Marcus Wellington. Maybe he'll understand, my mother said as we pulled into our driveway. Maybe if we explain about Jessica and the misunderstanding. Mom, I said gently. Marcus Wellington doesn't care about family dynamics. He cares about his property, his irreplaceable pristine collector's car that you sold to a criminal for grocery money. What about insurance? My father asked desperately. Insurance doesn't cover theft by family members. Besides, the car wasn't stolen from Marcus. It was stolen from me by you while I was supposed to be keeping it safe. As we sat in the car, each lost in our own thoughts about the approaching disaster, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. The photo showed her raising a champagne glass on what looked like a yacht with the Eiffel Tower twinkling in the background. The caption read, "Living my best life. Thanks for making my dreams come true." My parents saw the photo over my shoulder. The irony was devastating. Their daughter was celebrating with champagne bought with stolen money, while they faced potential criminal charges and financial ruin. She has no idea, my mother whispered. Neither did you, I replied until it was too late. The sun was setting as we finally got out of the car, casting long shadows across the driveway, where Marcus Wellington's Porsche should have been parked. In 2 days, he'd be expecting to pick up his prized possession. Instead, he'd find an empty garage and a story that would probably cost me my career. My parents trudged toward the house like condemned prisoners walking to their execution. They'd gambled everything on their daughter's happiness and lost spectacularly. The only question now was how much collateral damage their mistake would cause. Marcus Wellington arrived 18 hours early, pulling into my driveway in his silver Mercedes S-Class at exactly 7:30 in the morning. I watched him through my bedroom window, knowing this conversation would determine whether I had a career left to salvage. He was a tall, imposing man in his 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms. Everything about him, from his tailored suit to his confident stride, radiated success and authority. He wasn't someone accustomed to disappointment. I met him at the garage, my heart hammering, as I raised the door to reveal the empty space. Marcus stopped walking. His expression didn't change, but I could feel the temperature drop around us. Artemus, he said quietly, where is my car? The words tumbled out in a rush. I explained about my business trip, my parents misunderstanding the sale to Tommy Rodriguez, the transfer to Bradley Sinclair. With each detail, Marcus's face grew more rigid, more controlled, which somehow made it worse than if he'd started shouting immediately. When I finished, he stood in complete silence for nearly a minute, staring at the empty garage as if he could will the Porsche back into existence. You let your parents sell my father's car, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Your father's car. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. That Porsche belonged to my father, Gerald Wellington. We restored it together when I was 16 years old. Every summer for 3 years, we worked side by side in his garage, rebuilding the engine, refinishing the paint, replacing every worn component with period-correct parts. It was the last thing we did together before he died of cancer. I felt the blood drain from my face. Marcus, I had no idea. If I'd known the sentimental value, his control finally cracked, and his voice rose to a roar. That car is irreplaceable. Every bolt, every gasket, every piece of chrome was touched by my father's hands. We painted it together. We test drove it together. It was our bond, our shared accomplishment, our legacy. My parents had heard the shouting and emerged from the house still in their bathrobes. They looked small and pathetic compared to Marcus's imposing figure. Mr. Wellington. My father began, we're so sorry, we had no idea about your father. If we could undo what we did, undo it. Marcus spun toward him. You sold a man's memories to fund your daughter's shopping spree. You took something irreplaceable and handed it to car thieves for vacation money. We'll make this right, my mother pleaded. We'll find the car, buy it back, whatever it takes. Marcus laughed bitterly. With what money do you have $300,000 lying around? Can you magically restore 30 years of sentimental value? Can you bring back the hours my father and I spent together working on that engine? He pulled out his phone and started dialing. I'm calling my lawyer. You're going to face criminal charges for theft. I'm going to sue you for every penny you have and every penny you'll ever earn. But first, I'm calling my contacts at Automotive News, Classic Car Weekly, and Collector Car Monthly. By tomorrow, every business owner in this industry will know that Artemus Crawford can't be trusted with valuable property. Please, I said, my parents made a mistake, but destroying my reputation won't bring back your car. Your reputation. Marcus's eyes blazed with fury. You entrusted my most precious possession to people who sold it for pocket change. You failed in the most basic responsibility of safeguarding my property. Why should I care about your reputation when you showed such blatant disregard for mine, he was right and I knew it. Professional relationships were built on trust, and I'd violated that trust in the worst possible way. It didn't matter that my parents had acted without my knowledge. I was responsible for the car's safety. I'll give you 72 hours, Marcus said, his voice returning to its deadly calm tone. 72 hours to return my father's car in the exact condition it was when you took custody. If you fail, I will destroy you professionally, financially, and legally. I have connections throughout the automotive industry, the business community, and the legal system. When I'm finished with you, you'll never work in consulting again, never get a business loan again, never escape the consequences of your failure. He turned and walked back toward his Mercedes, then paused and looked over his shoulder. Oh, and Artemus, that contract worth $2 million we discussed last week. Consider it canceled. I don't do business with people who can't protect my interests. The Mercedes pulled away, leaving us standing in shocked silence. $2 million. The contract that would have set my business up for the next 5 years gone with the Porsche. My parents finally understood the full scope of the disaster they'd created. This wasn't just about returning a car anymore. It was about salvaging what remained of my professional life before Marcus's influence destroyed it completely. 72 hours, my father repeated numbly. To find a car that's already disappeared into an underground network, I added. To somehow retrieve something worth $300,000 when we have maybe $50,000 in combined assets. My mother was crying again. Call Jessica, make her come home. She has to help fix this. I dialed my sister's number knowing it was futile. She answered on the 5th ring, sounding breathless and happy. Artemus. You should see this place. I'm at the Louvre, and tonight I'm seeing a show at the Opera House. This is the most amazing experience of my life. Jessica, you need to come home right now. Mom and Dad sold a car that wasn't theirs, and were facing serious legal problems. What? That's ridiculous. It was just some old Porsche taking up space in your garage. How much trouble could that cause? $300,000 worth of trouble, plus criminal charges, plus the destruction of my business. There was silence on the line. Then Jessica's voice returned harder and more defensive. That's not my problem. I didn't ask them to sell anything. I just mentioned that I needed money for this trip, and they offered to help. If they made bad decisions, that's on them, not me. The money they gave you was stolen, Jessica. You're spending stolen money. I don't care where it came from. This is my one chance to see Europe, to live like my friends do, to have nice things for once in my life. I'm not giving that up because Mom and Dad are dramatic about some stupid car. She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. My sister was so self-centered that she'd rather let her family face criminal charges than interrupt her vacation. She's not coming back, I told my parents. Then we'll handle this ourselves, my father said with false determination. We'll mortgage the house, take out loans, whatever it takes. With what collateral, Dad? You're talking about trying to raise more money than this house is worth to buy back a car that's already vanished into a criminal network. Even if we could raise the money, Bradley Sinclair won't sell it back. The reality was inescapable. In 69 hours, Marcus Wellington would return expecting his father's restored Porsche. When we couldn't deliver, he'd follow through on his threats. My business would be finished, my parents would face felony charges, and our family would be financially destroyed. All because they wanted to give their spoiled daughter a luxury vacation she hadn't earned and couldn't afford. The next morning, my parents made the hardest decision of their parenting lives. They called their bank and froze every account Jessica had access to, canceling her credit cards and cutting off her financial lifeline. We have to, my mother said through tears as she spoke to the customer service representative. Cancel everything. All cards, all access. Yes, I understand she's in a foreign country. Yes, this is what we want. 2 hours later, my phone exploded with missed calls from Jessica. When I finally answered, her voice was a mixture of panic and rage. What did you do? My cards aren't working. I'm standing in Hermes, trying to buy a scarf, and they're telling me my credit is declined. Mom and Dad cut off your funds, I explained calmly. They need every penny to try to fix the mess they created by selling Marcus's car. That's not fair. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just trying to have a normal vacation like everyone else my age. Normal people don't fund their vacations with stolen money, Jessica. It wasn't stolen. Mom and Dad gave it to me willingly. If they're having buyer's remorse, that's their problem, not mine. Her voice rose to a shriek. I've already paid for my hotel through the end of the month. I have reservations at restaurants, tickets to shows, appointments at spas. You can't just strand me here. Figure it out, I said. Get a job, contact the embassy, ask your friends for help. But you're not getting another dime of stolen money from this family. I hate you, she screamed. I hate all of you. This is ruining my life. She hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt proud of my parents for setting a boundary with their golden child. That pride didn't last long. Over the next several hours, Jessica called every family friend, distant relative, and former colleague she could think of, begging for money and spinning increasingly dramatic stories about being abandoned in Europe. She called me crying, reported my Aunt Nancy. Said you'd left her homeless in Paris. Of course, when I offered to send her a plane ticket home, she hung up on me. She told me the family business was bankrupt and you needed her to stay in Europe for safety reasons, added my father's old colleague Jim. Asked for $5,000. When I said I'd call you to confirm, she got very angry. By evening, Jessica had burned through her entire contact list and alienated most of our family friends with her transparent manipulation attempts, but the real disaster was still to come. At 11 p.m. Paris time, my mother's phone rang. It was Jessica calling collect from a French police station. Mom, you have to help me, she sobbed. I'm in jail. They arrested me for theft. Theft? My mother gasped. What happened? I was at this restaurant, this really nice place I'd already eaten at twice before. When the bill came, my card was declined. I tried to explain about the mix-up with my accounts, but they didn't speak English very well. I was going to go back to my hotel and figure out how to pay them tomorrow, but they called the police. My father took the phone. Jessica, why didn't you just call us from the restaurant? We could have helped you work something out with them. Because I was embarrassed. Because I thought the card problem would resolve itself. Because I didn't want to admit that my own family had stranded me in a foreign country. You stranded yourself, I said loudly enough for her to hear. You chose to stay in Europe spending stolen money instead of coming home to help fix the problem you helped create. I didn't create anything. You're the one who was supposed to be watching some stupid car. You're the one who failed at your job. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes with Jessica alternating between self-pity and blame. She'd been released on the promise to appear in court the following week, but her passport had been confiscated until she resolved the restaurant debt. How much do you owe them? My mother asked weakly. 800 euros. But Mom, that's just the restaurant. The hotel is threatening to kick me out because my card was declined there too. I owe them 4,000 euros for the week I've already stayed. And there are other places, shops, where I promised to come back and pay when the card issue was resolved. The number kept growing. Jessica had been living beyond her means, even with the stolen car money, charging expenses to credit cards and running up debts across Paris. She'd been spending like a lottery winner, assuming the money would keep flowing from her enabling parents. I can't come home anyway, she admitted finally. My passport is being held by the court and I owe money to at least 6 different places. If I don't pay them back, they'll issue warrants. My parents exchanged horrified looks. Their daughter wasn't just stranded in Europe. She was trapped by her own irresponsible spending. We don't have 800 euros to spare, my father said. Every penny we have is going toward trying to get Marcus's car back. Then what am I supposed to do? Jessica wailed. Sleep on the streets, starve, get arrested again. You're supposed to face the consequences of your choices, I said. You're supposed to grow up, and figure out how to solve your own problems instead of expecting other people to clean up your messes. You're heartless, I'm your sister. I'm in trouble in a foreign country. You're in trouble because you chose to be in a foreign country, spending money you knew wasn't yours. Because you chose to ignore the problems at home and keep partying. Because you chose yourself over your family. For the first time in our conversation, Jessica fell silent. Maybe she was finally processing the reality of her situation, or maybe she was just planning her next manipulation attempt. The American Embassy is helping me find a job, she said quietly. Cleaning offices at night under the table just enough to pay for basic food and a hostel bed. It's humiliating. It's honest work, my father said. Something you should have been doing instead of expecting us to fund your fantasy lifestyle. After she hung up, my parents sat in their living room, staring at the silent phone. Their precious daughter, the child they'd sacrificed everything to spoil, was learning hard lessons about consequences in a Parisian hostel. She sounded different, my mother observed. She sounded desperate, I corrected. There's a difference between learning and just being cornered by circumstances. But as we prepared for what might be our last night before Marcus's deadline, I wondered if Jessica's fall from grace might finally force her to see the world through someone else's eyes. Unfortunately, we didn't have the luxury of waiting to find out. We had 36 hours to perform a miracle, and no amount of character growth would bring back that Porsche. Marcus Wellington had apparently spent his 72-hour deadline making phone calls. The police arrived at 6:30 in the morning with warrants for my parents' arrest on charges of theft of property valued over $50,000. Detective Williams was a heavy-set man in his 40s who spoke with the weary tone of someone who'd seen every variety of human stupidity. He read my parents their rights while they stood in their bathrobes looking confused and terrified. Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, you're being charged with felony theft and criminal conversion of property. The complainant has provided evidence that you sold a 1977 Porsche 911 Turbo belonging to Mr. Marcus Wellington without his knowledge or consent. It was a misunderstanding, my mother pleaded. We thought it was our son's car. We were trying to help our daughter. Ma'am, ignorance of ownership doesn't constitute a legal defense for theft. You'll need to discuss the details with your attorney. As they led my parents away in handcuffs, neighbors gathered on their front porches to watch the spectacle. The Hendersons from next door pretended to water their plants while gawking openly. Mrs. Patterson across the street wasn't even pretending. She stood in her doorway with her arms crossed, drinking in every detail of our family's humiliation. I followed the police cars to the station and called attorney Sarah Patterson, who my business insurance had recommended for exactly this type of disaster. She was a sharp-featured woman in her late 30s, with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd handled plenty of hopeless cases. Mr. Crawford, she said after reviewing the arrest report, your parents are in serious trouble. Theft of property over $50,000 carries a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison. The fact that the victim can prove financial harm makes this a strong case for the prosecution. What about the misunderstanding angle? They genuinely thought they were helping me by selling what they believed was my car. Sarah shook her head. The prosecution will argue that reasonable people don't sell sports cars worth $15,000 without asking questions. They'll say your parents were willfully blind to obvious signs that something wasn't right. What obvious signs? The value discrepancy for starters. No one legitimately sells a Porsche 911 for $15,000 unless there's something wrong with it or the sale. The fact that it was stored in your garage instead of being driven regularly. The pristine condition that should have indicated collector status. A jury will likely conclude that your parents suspected the car was valuable and chose to ignore that suspicion. She was right. Looking at the situation objectively, my parents' story sounded like a convenient excuse for theft. Who sells a sports car without researching its value? Who assumes their adult son would leave a $15,000 vehicle sitting unused in their garage? There's something else, Sarah continued, sliding a folder across her desk. Mr. Wellington has been recording all of your interactions since the car went missing. He has audio evidence of your father admitting they sold the car without permission and your mother acknowledging they knew it was valuable. The folder contained transcripts of conversations I remembered having, but seeing them in black and white made them sound damning. My father saying, "We made a decision about property in our family's possession," looked like an admission of intentional theft. My mother's comment about the car taking up space suggested casual disregard for someone else's property. He was recording us the whole time. Perfectly legal in this state as long as one party consents. Mr. Wellington consented to recording his own conversations. Your family wasn't informed, but they weren't required to be. While Sarah explained the legal implications, my phone buzzed with notifications from the local newspaper's website. Someone had tipped them off about the arrest, and the story was already online. Local business consultants' parents arrested for luxury car theft. The article was brief but devastating. It mentioned my consulting business by name, described the $300,000 value of the stolen Porsche, and included quotes from Marcus about the breach of trust involved in the case. My professional reputation was being destroyed in real time. Within hours, my father's employer placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the criminal case. The insurance company he'd worked for 23 years couldn't afford to have accused felons processing claims and handling sensitive financial information. My mother's social circles evaporated even faster. The book club she'd belonged to for 15 years asked her to take a leave of absence until this matter is resolved. Her closest friend Janet left an awkward voicemail explaining that she couldn't be seen associating with accused criminals. "This is exactly what Marcus wanted," I told Sarah. "He's not just seeking justice. He's orchestrating our complete social and financial destruction. Can you blame him? His father's car is gone possibly forever. From his perspective, your family stole irreplaceable memories for vacation money. He wants you to understand what loss feels like." That afternoon, Bradley Sinclair called Marcus directly. Sarah had arranged for the conversation to be recorded as potential evidence for plea negotiations. "Mr. Wellington," Bradley said in his smooth voice, "I understand you're experiencing some distress over a certain 1977 Porsche. I might be willing to facilitate its return for the right price." "What price?" Marcus asked coldly. $400,000. Cash. No questions asked. The car will be returned to its original location within 48 hours of payment. $400,000 for a car worth $300,000 that you bought for $60,000. Mr. Wellington, I'm not selling you a car. I'm selling you a solution to a very expensive legal problem. Your lawsuit against the Crawford family will cost you more than $100,000 in legal fees, and you'll never recover the full amount even if you win. My offer resolves everything cleanly and quietly." Marcus hung up without responding, but the message was clear. Bradley had deliberately driven up the price, knowing we were desperate. Even if we could somehow raise $400,000, there was no guarantee he'd actually return the car. "He's toying with us," I told Sarah. "He knows we can't raise that kind of money, and he knows Marcus won't pay it on principle. Your parents' best option at this point is to plead guilty and hope for a lenient sentence," Sarah said. "If they express genuine remorse and offer to pay restitution, they might avoid prison time. Restitution we can't afford for a car, we can't recover from criminals who are extorting us. That's the reality of the situation, Mr. Crawford. Your parents committed a serious crime with devastating consequences. The legal system doesn't make exceptions for good intentions or family dynamics." As I left Sarah's office, my phone rang. It was Jessica calling collect from Paris. "I saw the news article online," she said without preamble. "Mom and Dad were arrested." "Yes. They're facing felony charges because of the car they sold to pay for your vacation." There was a long silence. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. "I didn't know it would come to this. What did you think would happen? Did you imagine that stealing a $300,000 car wouldn't have consequences? I didn't know it was stolen. I thought it was your old car that you didn't need anymore. You knew something was wrong, Jessica. You knew mom and dad didn't have $15,000 lying around, but you didn't ask questions because you wanted the money more than you wanted the truth. Another silence. Is there anything I can do? Any way I can help? You can come home and testify that you pressured them for money. You can admit that you knew they were making financial sacrifices they couldn't afford. You can take responsibility for your part in this disaster. I can't come home. I told you my passport is being held by the French courts until I pay my debts. Then you can live with the consequences of your choices while mom and dad live with the consequences of theirs. After hanging up, I sat in my car outside the attorney's office, watching normal people live their normal lives. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry had been managing client deadlines and expanding my business. Now my parents were facing prison, my career was in ruins, and my sister was trapped in Europe by her own greed. Marcus Wellington had promised to destroy us, and he was succeeding beyond his wildest expectations. The only question left was whether we'd have anything left to rebuild when the destruction was complete. The next morning, I received a call that changed everything. Agent Catherine Brooks from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division asked me to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, away from my house and office. She was a compact woman in her early 40s with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm confidence that suggested she'd dealt with situations far more complex than stolen sports cars. She ordered black coffee and got straight to business. "Mr. Crawford, we need to discuss your involvement in Operation Fast Track." I stared at her blankly. "I'm sorry, what involvement?" "The investigation into Bradley Sinclair's automotive theft and money laundering network. The operation you've been assisting with for the past 4 months." "Agent Brooks, I think there's been some confusion. I've never heard of any operation, and I only met Bradley Sinclair 2 days ago when he bought Marcus Wellington's Porsche." She smiled and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Crawford, you contacted our financial crimes tip line in September regarding suspicious automotive transactions you'd observed while conducting business consultations. You specifically mentioned noticing patterns in high-end car sales that suggested money laundering activities." The memory came flooding back. I had called the FBI months ago after reviewing financial records for a client who owned several exotic car dealerships. The numbers hadn't made sense. Cars were being bought and sold at prices that seemed designed to move money rather than reflect actual value. "You remember now," Agent Brooks noted. "You provided us with detailed financial analysis that helped us identify Bradley Sinclair as a key figure in a multi-state operation involving stolen vehicles, money laundering, and tax evasion. But that was just a tip. I never agreed to participate in any investigation. Not directly, but when Bradley contacted you about the Wellington Porsche, you immediately called our tip line. Agent Rodriguez instructed you to let the transaction proceed while we gathered evidence." I felt the world shifting around me. "Agent Rodriguez, I never spoke to anyone named Rodriguez." Agent Brooks pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. It was my voice, clear and unmistakable. "This is Artemus Crawford. The subject we discussed is attempting to acquire the Wellington vehicle. Should I proceed as planned?" A man's voice responded, "Proceed with the handoff. We'll monitor the transaction and move to the next phase once the asset is transferred." "I never made that call," I said weakly. But even as the words left my mouth, I remembered. The morning my parents sold the car, I'd been frantic. I'd found the FBI tip line number in my phone and called, hoping they could help track down the stolen Porsche. The agent I spoke to had told me to let the situation develop while they assessed the criminal network. "Mr. Crawford?" Agent Brooks said gently, "You've been working undercover for us whether you fully realized it or not. Your family situation provided the perfect cover for a sting operation we'd been planning for months." "My family's situation? You mean my parents' arrest? My sister stranded in Europe? My business being destroyed? Marcus Wellington was briefed on the operation 3 days ago. The recordings he made of your family's conversations were done at our request to establish a pattern of criminal behavior that would hold up in court. Your parents weren't really arrested. Those were actors we sent to create a believable scenario. I felt like I was drowning. Actors. Detective Williams is one of our undercover specialists. The arrest was staged to pressure Bradley Sinclair into making contact, which he did exactly as we predicted. His offer to return the car for $400,000 was recorded and will serve as evidence of extortion and money laundering. Agent Brooks opened her folder and showed me surveillance photos of Bradley's warehouse operation. Dozens of exotic cars were arranged in neat rows, each with detailed documentation attached to the windshield. We raided 3 facilities this morning, she continued. Bradley Sinclair, Tommy Rodriguez, and 14 associates are in federal custody. We recovered 67 stolen vehicles worth more than $12 million, including Marcus's Porsche. The Porsche is safe, sitting in our evidence garage completely unharmed. Bradley was planning to ship it to a collector in Dubai next week, but we intercepted it before any permanent damage was done. I sat in stunned silence trying to process everything I'd learned. My parents' arrest had been fake. Marcus's rage had been an act. My business reputation, while damaged, could be restored once the truth came out. Why didn't you tell me what was happening? Do you have any idea what the past few days have been like? Mr. Crawford undercover operations require genuine emotional responses to be believable. If you'd known this was a setup, Bradley would have spotted the deception immediately. Your family's authentic distress sold the story. My sister is still trapped in Paris because of this authentic distress. Agent Brooks looked uncomfortable for the first time. Ms. Crawford's situation is complex. Her financial difficulties in Europe are real, but they're the result of her own choices rather than any actions we orchestrated. We can facilitate her return home, but we can't undo the debts she accumulated through irresponsible spending. And my parents, do they know yet? Marcus is briefing them right now. They'll be relieved to learn they won't face criminal charges, but they'll still need to confront the reality of what they did. They did sell someone else's property without permission, even if the ultimate consequences were mitigated by our operation. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my mother sobbing with relief and confusion. Artemus, we don't understand what's happening. Mr. Wellington says the arrest was fake, but we really did sell his car. Are we in trouble or not? Mom, I'm learning about this at the same time you are. The important thing is that everyone is safe. The car is being returned, and you won't go to prison. We'll figure out the rest together. After hanging up, I looked at Agent Brooks. What happens to my business? Marcus's contract offer, my professional reputation. Marcus Wellington has been very impressed with your cooperation and discretion throughout this operation. He's not only reinstating your contract, he's recommending you to other business owners who've been victimized by similar schemes. Your role in dismantling this criminal network will actually enhance your reputation once the story becomes public. She handed me an official-looking document. This is a commendation letter from the FBI acknowledging your assistance in Operation Fast Track. The financial reward for your contribution is $50,000, which should help your family recover from any expenses incurred during the investigation. I stared at the letter, trying to reconcile this surreal turn of events with the nightmare of the past few days. So we went from facing financial ruin to receiving a government reward? Crime doesn't pay Mr. Crawford, but helping to stop crime does. Your family's situation provided us with the cover we needed to infiltrate Bradley's network and gather evidence of much larger crimes. 67 families will get their stolen cars back because of what happened here. As Agent Brooks gathered her files, she paused and looked at me seriously. Your parents made a significant error in judgment by selling that car without your knowledge. While they won't face criminal charges, they still need to address the underlying issues that led to their decision. Consider this a wake-up call about family dynamics and communication. And Jessica, your sister's situation in Europe will resolve itself. once she accepts responsibility for her choices. We can help with the logistics of getting her home, but we can't force her to mature overnight. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was emerging from a nightmare into daylight. The past few days had been orchestrated theater, but the emotions and revelations had been entirely real. My family's dysfunction hadn't been fake, just the ultimate consequences. I had a lot of phone calls to make and relationships to rebuild. But for the first time since arriving home from Seattle, I felt like we might actually emerge from this crisis stronger than we'd entered it. 6 months later, I stood in the same garage where this nightmare had begun, watching Marcus Wellington lovingly inspect every detail of his father's restored Porsche. The car looked exactly as it had the day I'd first taken custody of it, but everything else about our situation had changed completely. "She's perfect," Marcus said, running his hand along the flawless paint. "The FBI's evidence team took better care of her than some professional restoration shops." "I'm still amazed by how everything turned out," I admitted. 3 days ago, I thought we were facing complete ruin. Now you're offering me a partnership in your company." Marcus smiled. "Artemus, what impressed me wasn't your family's crisis management skills. It was your integrity under pressure. When you thought you'd lost my car through negligence, you didn't make excuses or try to shift blame. You accepted responsibility and worked toward a solution. That's the kind of character I want in a business partner." Wellington Security Consulting had grown beyond my wildest expectations. The FBI commendation letter had opened doors with clients who valued discretion and ethical conduct. Marcus's recommendation had brought in Fortune 500 companies seeking consultants who understood the importance of protecting valuable assets. "Your parents have made remarkable progress," Marcus continued. "The family therapy sessions seemed to be helping." He was right. My parents had thrown themselves into counseling with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a family therapist who specialized in favoritism and enabling behaviors. The sessions had been painful but necessary. "I never realized how differently we treated you and Jessica," my mother had admitted during one particularly difficult session. "We were so worried about her struggles that we took your successes for granted. We assumed you were strong enough to handle everything while she needed constant support." My father had been equally introspective. "I think we were afraid of Jessica's emotions. When she got upset or disappointed, it was easier to give her what she wanted than to help her learn to cope with frustration. We enabled her worst impulses because we were uncomfortable with conflict." Dr. Martinez had helped them understand that their favoritism hadn't actually helped Jessica. It had stunted her emotional growth and created unrealistic expectations about how the world would treat her. The transformation in my sister had been the most dramatic change. 3 weeks after Bradley's arrest, Jessica had finally swallowed her pride and contacted the American Embassy for help returning home. The job cleaning office buildings had been humbling, but it had also taught her the value of honest work. "I spent 26 years expecting other people to solve my problems," she'd told me during our first real conversation since her return. Living in that Paris hostel, working for minimum wage, depending on charity from strangers. It was the first time I understood what most people deal with every day. Jessica had used her experience in Europe to land a job with a nonprofit organization that helped Americans stranded abroad. Her first-hand understanding of desperation and poor decision-making made her surprisingly effective at helping people in crisis. "I can spot the entitled attitudes because I recognize them from my own behavior," she'd explained. "I know the difference between someone facing genuine hardship and someone who created their own problems through selfishness." The change in family dynamics had been profound. Our monthly dinners had evolved from tense affairs, where Jessica dominated the conversation with complaints, into genuine discussions about growth, accountability, and mutual support. "Remember when you thought we were terrible parents?" my mother had joked during our most recent dinner. "Now we're poster children for successful family therapy." "You weren't terrible parents," I'd corrected. You were parents who made mistakes and then took responsibility for fixing them. That's exactly what good parents do. The financial rewards from the FBI operation had allowed my parents to establish the Crawford Foundation, a scholarship fund for students from single-parent households. They volunteered 20 hours per week interviewing applicants and mentoring recipients. It feels good to give without expecting anything in return, my father had reflected. For years, our generosity toward Jessica was really just conflict avoidance. This is different. These kids earn what we give them. Marcus started the Porsche's engine and the familiar rumble filled the garage. You know what the best part of this whole experience has been? Getting your father's car back safely. That was wonderful. But the best part has been watching your family choose growth over victimhood. Many families would have used the trauma of this experience as an excuse to avoid difficult conversations. You used it as a catalyst for positive change. He was right. The crisis had forced us to confront issues we'd been avoiding for years. Without the shock of almost losing everything, we might have continued enabling Jessica's selfishness and ignoring the dysfunction in our family relationships. "I have something for you," Marcus said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "The final paperwork for the Wellington-Crawford partnership. We're officially partners as of tomorrow." I looked at the legal documents that represented the culmination of everything I'd worked toward in my career. Marcus Wellington, one of the most respected businessmen in our industry, was offering me an equal partnership in a company worth millions. "There's one condition," he added with a smile. "Every year on the anniversary of Operation Fast Track, we're going to tell this story to our employees. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder that integrity under pressure is the foundation of any successful business." That evening, I called Jessica in her apartment across town. She'd moved out of my parents' house and was supporting herself entirely through her nonprofit work. "How did the partnership signing go?" she asked. "Officially official as of tomorrow. How was your day at the foundation?" "We helped a family in Mexico City today. A businessman whose passport was stolen and who couldn't afford to replace it. 6 months ago, I would have thought he was exaggerating his problems. Now, I understand exactly how quickly things can spiral out of control when you're stranded somewhere with no resources. Any regrets about the path that led you there?" Jessica was quiet for a moment. "I regret the pain I caused you and Mom and Dad. I regret being so selfish and irresponsible. But I don't regret the lessons I learned. I needed to hit bottom before I could understand how to build myself back up properly." As I hung up the phone, I reflected on the journey we'd all taken. 6 months ago, our family had been held together by habits and obligations. Today, we were connected by mutual respect, honest communication, and shared commitment to continued growth. The 1977 Porsche 911 Turbo sat in my garage once again, but this time I understood its true value. It wasn't just a collector's car or a symbol of wealth. It was a reminder that some things once lost through carelessness or selfishness can never be truly replaced. But sometimes if you're incredibly fortunate and willing to do the hard work of genuine change, you get a second chance to prove that you've learned from your mistakes. My family had earned that second chance, and we were determined not to waste it. The most important lesson we'd learned was simple, but profound. Love isn't about giving people what they want. It's about helping them become who they're meant to be. My parents had thought they were loving Jessica by enabling her selfish behavior. They discovered that real love sometimes requires saying no, setting boundaries, and allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. In the end, the crisis that almost destroyed our family had actually saved it. We learned the trust once broken must be rebuilt through consistent actions rather than good intentions. We discovered that privilege carries responsibility, and that genuine happiness comes from earning what you have rather than being handed what you want. Most importantly, we'd realized that it's never too late to change, to grow, and to choose integrity over convenience. The person we become in our darkest moments reveals our true character, but the person we choose to become afterward determines our destiny. Have you ever been in a situation where a crisis forced your family to confront uncomfortable truths about your relationships? How did you handle the challenge of rebuilding trust after someone's poor choices affected the entire family? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing about second chances and family redemption. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Remember, every family faces challenges, but it's how we respond to those challenges that defines who we become. Keep growing, keep learning, and never underestimate the power of genuine accountability to transform relationships and rebuild trust. Until next time, may your own family find the courage to have the hard conversations that lead to genuine love and respect.